And we are all too familiar with the waiting that this life in this world deals us. With another round of resumes to send out, or another round of chemo, another negative on another pregnancy test, another underwhelming first date, another specialist, another gray winter day, another shift at the same old job, or another afternoon staring at the four walls of a prison cell just waiting for the night to come. How can this be it? You don't get very far into a life of faith, or just into life itself for that matter, without asking your own version of the question, how can this possibly be it? You know what it's like to ask that question? You asking some version of it now even?
You're praying about your finances, but you see nothing. You're praying for your marriage, your family members, but you see nothing. You got a report from the doctor, but you are praying for healing, but you see nothing. At work, in your company, you're seeing nothing. You got a dream, but nothing. Friends, you may see nothing, but you can bank on the fact and the promise of the resurrection that because Jesus is alive, when you see nothing, it means that Jesus is up to something. He's at work. He's not constrained to time and space. He has no limitations. Right now, he is sorting your life. He's figuring things out. He is always at work. When you don't see, he's moving. When you don't feel, he's fighting. When there is silence, it doesn't mean he's still. You may be down to nothing, and that just means God's up to something.
You gotta understand, God wastes nothing. Be careful, because the enemy loves to tempt us, loves to make us think that we have wasted seasons of our lives. But because of God's sovereignty and because of God's providence and because God knows both beginning and God knows end, we can trust that God wastes nothing, because you never know where God wants to take you, because God is using it all.
Over and over again in the Bible, we're told to wait upon the Lord. When you don't understand, don't be unwilling to wait. I was speaking about preachers. Another preacher said to me, who was in a hard spot, he said, I know that God put me here. I just wonder if he remembers where he put me. God knows where you are. The very hairs of your head are numbered. God has his schedule. When you don't understand, don't demand to understand. Don't fail to be faithful. Don't bow to bitterness. Friend, don't be unwilling to wait. God is never late, but he's never ahead of time. It's like the sun coming up. One thing about the sun coming up is you can't hurry it and you can't stop it. And that's the way God is. God is always on time.
No matter what you're going through, he's an on-time God. Number one, I found out he's never early. Flip that coin over, though, I found out he's never late. He's an on-time God.
One of the things you and I must always understand is that while you're in the waiting room, God is in his workroom. And that while you are waiting on God to give you clarity, waiting on God to grant the favor, waiting on God to open the door, waiting on God for the opportunity, waiting on God for closure, you've got to understand that while you're still waiting, God is in his workroom, in his sovereignty of his plan, and he is working in your situation. He is working in that situation. He is working all over the world and in all spaces at the same time. God's waiting room is God's working room. And sometimes we got to remind ourselves that he is working.
Psalm 131 is one of the shortest Psalms. It's 3 verses long. You can read it in a second. Charles Spurgeon called it the shortest to read, but the slowest to learn. We bear witness to the light by learning the peace of God and trusting him in the midst of the dark. Jesus' preferred teaching metaphors were agricultural. He's constantly pointing out ways that the Creator has written divine lessons into the very soil that we live on. And it is a miserable farmer who plants a seed and then goes out day after day to anxiously look to see if it's working. Did it take? Has the seed broken soil? Will it really make good on its promise to go from this tiny little thing to growing into something that can nourish and satisfy? No, the farmer has to get used to the rhythm that every harvest requires waiting. That between planting and reaping, there are long stretches of cold, dark days when all the real work is happening in underground, invisible to me. Every time a farmer sows a seed, it's an act of radical trust. And every winter between planting and reaping, that farmer must know peace in the midst of darkness. Waiting is where we discover peace or get eaten alive by anxiety and toil. Peace, that elusive state that we're all after, it's ultimately not found in resolution. Peace is not the end of the wait, because what I'm waiting on is just going to be replaced by another need, and then another, and the next one will feel as urgent as this one does. There's a deeper sort of peace, a variety of peace that cannot be taken by this world because it wasn't given by this world, and its presence. Peace is God's presence in the midst of pain. It is not the absence of pain. It's God's presence here with me in the waiting, not the end of the wait. When you're waiting, you're not doing nothing. You're doing the most important something there is. You're allowing your soul to grow up. If you can't be still and wait, you can't become who God created you to be.
Job says, I look and I go forward, but he, speaking of God, he is not there. And backward, but I cannot perceive him. When he works on the left hand, I cannot behold him. And when he turns and I turn and go right, I can't see him then. Verse 10, but he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold. Powerful words. It's obvious that Job is in a time in his life where he's saying, God, where are you? He's saying, God, where are you? You seem unconcerned, absent, and silent when I need you the most. He had lost his family, his children. He had lost his wealth. He had lost his health. He had lost his friends. He had lost everything good in his life. And now in chapter 23, he's lost his God. He's lost his God. I mean, that's when you really hit the place about as low as you can go when you can't find, you feel like you're God abandoned. The absence of God. It's unexplained. He's not there. God, where are you? He said, I just don't see him. I just keep going through it. But I love what he said at the end of it, the conclusion of it all. His conclusion is, I don't know where I am anymore. I don't know what's going on anymore. He said, I don't know where he is, but he knows where I am, for he knows the path that I take. Did you hear that verse? He knows where I am, even when I don't know where he is and I can't perceive him, and he knows my name. He knows the number of hairs on my head. He knows my fingerprint. He knows everything about the path that I am on. And then he ends with a powerful faith confession. And when he has tried me, I will come forth as gold. Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. This story teaches us that God is still working when you think your situation is at its last sickening conclusion. God is still working. I'm preaching to somebody today, a lot of somebodies, who the enemy has told you it's way too late for any change good to ever come. You don't understand. Your case is different, but your case is not different. Learn something from this. God is still working.
And you will find yourself in those very moments where you're going to have to ask yourself the question, are you going to be petty or are you going to be purposeful? Are you going to be jealous or are you going to be joyful? Are you going to be grateful or are you going to begin to grumble? Are you going to be impatient or are you going to be intentional? Waiting will test your integrity. That's what waiting does. Waiting always reveals your character. It's by the very nature. That's why you find it so consistently throughout the scriptures that God often allows his servants to navigate through waiting seasons, because waiting often reveals character. Friends, it is this ideal of waiting and this willingness to wait that is an essential skill of the Christian life. That no matter where we are in our juncture, in our journey of following Christ, waiting is a prerequisite for how we will grow into maturity. That we will discover that waiting on God is always worth it.
And the reality of this world includes things like delay, pain, loss, disappointment, and unmet expectations. Everything significant that God does in this world and in us, it involves long stretches of waiting.
I mean, how do you spend your waiting time is everything. How you spend your waiting season is everything. Waiting time is not wasting time. Waiting time is worshiping time. And in that worship, you can bring wherever you may be in your waiting season. That perhaps you're waiting on the doctors to tell your loved one they are cancer-free. Or perhaps you're waiting on a relationship to get better. Or perhaps you're waiting on the Lord to send a relationship that you long for. That in our waiting, we must worship. And in our worship, we must trust him by bringing our disappointment and our faith and our desperation. That God, it has not been easy. God, it has been challenging. God, the uncertainty has been incredibly difficult. But God, I am trusting you for what you're going to do, and I am trusting you for how you are going to work in my life and through my life. That he is a God that's always worth waiting for. That he is a God that has not forgotten about us. That he is a God that has a sovereign plan that he is working. That he is the same God that called you from the very inception. He is worth waiting for.